what the inspiration was to actually start the company. It was a myriad of things, to be honest. One thing was I was involved in a mass shooting in a Madden tournament where unfortunately 2 of my friends were killed and 10 of my friends were shot. And in not only being, a part of that, but at the same exact time seeing the aftermath of that and the way it was handled, I'll be honest in saying that the biggest issue that I had coming out of that was survivors like remorse and survivor's guilt. And obviously seeing that there were certain people who it affected obviously more so than myself because they were, wounded by gunshot or whatever the case may be, or, whatever the reasons were. So because of that, it really hit me very, very hard. But at the same exact time, seeing the way that they were taken care of, or I should say the lack of the way that they were taken care of, was the most frustrating thing for me.
When I'm back in town, up the Addy trying to find you. When I lay you down, I'ma really miss your spine up. Know you got the crown, tell me why you trying to find love. I love her, but I can't tell.
So yeah, just go back a little bit into how you got into video games.
Yeah, exactly. So basically a long story. I've been playing games ever since the age of 4. I remember the first time I ever played games. My dad came home and he brought home a Sega, and he brought it with 2 games: the game of X-Men and also the game of Madden '93. With me being a young child, the first game I wanted to play, of course, was the X-Men game. Then after I had my own fill of that, is when I really got into Madden. I really grew up in a sports household where we love football. My dad is a huge fan of football. My mother's from the deep South, so she's a fan of football as well too. And since then, I really got into the whole scene. When I was in high school, I competed in a variety of tournaments, in terms of in the Madden Challenge scene, and I also continued when I went to college in Hofstra. In the year of 2007, I went to a big Madden Challenge tournament that was held at Madison Square Garden, and there I actually met Ray. And soon after there, we actually met him, and we decided to form our own esports team, which competed in the games of Madden and also in FIFA.
Nice. So Ray, you were already a talented Madden player at this time. How did that go down?
I was pretty good, but before I joined the crew, I hadn't even come close to what really my full potential was. So it really was joining the crew that really put me over the top. And when it was us together, it was about it started as 4 people, and then it ended up growing to about 8 and then 10 people. And then with that being said, we were all basically iron sharpening iron, traveling the country together, all getting better at the same exact time. And that's when things kind of exploded for me. So at that point, my highest ranking was number 1 in the world, which was obviously a tremendous honor in and of itself. Then through competition, the following years, we ended up winning the Crew v Crew Championship, which was also incredible to essentially see the rise of every single person, not just myself, within the crew. And, we just kept that going for quite some time. And literally, it never seemed like it was going to ever have to stop because gaming was just growing every single year beyond that.
Right. So take us to, what does it take to be the number 1 Madden player in the world? I played Madden. I'm not close.
Yeah. So I would say the number 1 thing, honestly, is just I would say it's probably 3 things. One is really having a great understanding of the game in and of itself. So repetition really matters. So putting in the time, hours and hours and hours, so you really know everything to expect from the actual game itself. The other thing, when you step into the actual competition realm, it's entirely different because you have so many people around you. And in Madden, it's kind of like M1 street basketball when you have that culture of everyone talking trash and betting on games and stuff like that. So when you have tens of thousands of dollars being bet around you, and then people obviously trying to influence your play by talking trash to you throughout that entire time, you have to be super confident and comfortable in those type of environments. So those are the big 2 things, is the repetition and then also being comfortable in that moment. But then beyond that, it really is just down the consistency of being, able to say I'm going to put this work in year after year after year and so on and so forth. So that was really the focal points of it. And then, beyond that, obviously playing sports my entire life, knowing football really helped. But when you're playing Madden, sometimes logic goes out the window depending on how the game was made that year. And you're just going to try to find exploits and being able to expose those type of things. So putting in that work continually, that was really what kind of helped. And then, of course, having a crew that could do the same exact thing, that also obviously helped. And we, again, were super competitive amongst one another. And that really, put us over the top.
No, I like that. So the iron was sharpening iron in the gaming world. And then obviously now it's, transition to the professional world. So tell me at that time, what were you doing professionally?
Yeah, so at that time, crazy enough, I was back in Long Island, and I was doing a bunch of jobs, really. I was a dispatcher. I was just doing a whole bunch of things, but it was around that time that Lemont was actually finalizing law school. Okay. And he was actually looking to intern at the U.S. Attorney's Office in Long Island, and that just so happened to be right near where I lived. So he hit me up and asked if he could stay with me for the summer and just, intern there. And when he did that, that's actually what kicked everything off, because it was at that time that Lemont insisted that we start a business together. And from my upbringing, no one in my family has ever started a business or ran a business or anything like that. So when he first came to me with it, I was like, whatever. But at the same time, he was really, really insistent upon it. And with that being said, I was like, all right, like let's see what's what. Let's see if we could do anything with it. And that's when I kind of like caught that bug. And once I did, I really wanted to then bring more to the table. So with him being an attorney, that's when I started getting into coding and looking into, software development and stuff like that. And in that, that's where things just took off, because I, tried to have the coding side of things on lock. He tried to obviously have the legal side of things on lock. And then, beyond that, we just were full-fledged into what we were doing at that point. And it was kind of like what we did with Madden, but at the same exact time now from the business, we were growing all over again. So everything we had learned from Madden of being unranked and then ultimately aspiring to be number one in the world kind of had that same exact mindset in the actual business side of things. So
Lemont, why were you insisting on wanting to start a business?
Yeah, so I guess it's for a number of like reasons. I come from a very fortunate background. Both of my parents actually owned their own businesses in like their own right. And then I just, in terms of just, I've been fortunate to go to very good schools and being around, a lot of smart people. But what I saw in Ray is that, how he approached the game of Madden, not only in terms of how great of a player he was, I actually saw it in terms of at technically the second tournament. I saw a play.
Yeah,
I can't say it. I can't say it. I saw it at the first tournament, because then, I just knew at the first tournament, I knew that he took it serious.
Gotcha.
And at that point, it was hard enough to find people that take it very seriously. But then at the second tournament, I realized how good he was, and I recognized that like talent. And the only way to be that good is to, one, you have a natural talent. You also have a natural understanding of the game of football. And of course, the biggest, most important factor is the work ethic. And after grinding with him in the trenches, but going to a variety of Madden tournaments through the years, I just thought that he could do this as well in like a business. So, we decided to jump on board. We went ahead and jump in with 2 feet in. And from that, we were off to the races.
No, I like that. Tell us about the landscape then, now in the video game world. I don't think a lot of people get to see behind the curtain. Like, what was the marketplace looking like? Like, was there a lot of diversity? What was the opportunity you saw in the gaming space?
Yeah, so I would say for that, it matters in terms of which part of the industry you're going to participate in. Okay. So if you were a like gamer, if you're going to be trying to become like a professional player or play on the esports side, then it would also depend on the diversity aspect of what game you're actually playing. If you're playing a sports game like football or like basketball or even some of the fighting games as like well too, then I would see that was a diverse landscape. In terms of more of the games like the shooters like Halo or Call of Duty, I would say for those wouldn't be as diverse, but for why that is, it might just be in terms of whatever type of communities may gravitate towards whatever game they have a interest in. I know with myself, I like sports because my parents like sports.
Right.
I was a huge fan of Michael Vick, as we all were. My favorite player growing up was Peyton Manning, huge fan of Kobe Bryant as well. So I just naturally gravitated to football and basketball. I don't like soccer, so I never played FIFA. But Ray liked soccer, so we also played as well in that too. For shooters, growing up, I played Rainbow Six as a casual, point, but, that wasn't my forte in games. So I just never even tried to go pro and things like that.
Gotcha.
And one thing to kind of like piggyback off of that,
yeah.
I try to describe it to people, like if you looked at when we played in our era, it's kind of like looking at like Bill Russell playing for the Celtics, because there was obviously serious competition, but at the same exact time, you didn't see people getting paid $1 million in the league back then, or getting paid $10 million contracts in the league back then. And it was kind of the same thing for us. We were, seeing tournaments where the winnings were $5,000, and ultimately the best tournament in that year, you could win maybe $100,000 or $150,000, but that pales in comparison today when you have a Fortnite tournament that, you're talking about $3 million as the payout. So, and then $100 million total for the entire prize pool. So it was an entirely different world where it was really, if you had to compare it, we were more like the Bill Russells of our day, where it's like serious competition, old school, definitely, super competitive, but at the same exact time, that pay wasn't there. So it was a different passion for the game. You had to, because you weren't doing it for the money. You were doing it to say you were the best. You were doing it for the competition aspect, but it was impossible to be saying that you were doing it for the money, because you could walk away with a great year in making like $40,000. So therefore, it wasn't that, wasn't that reason at all.
2 questions. One is a quick answer. Is Michael Vick, was he a cheat code? Was that like, looked down upon if you used the Falcons and were running with him all day long? Because that's what I would do.
That's exactly it. Michael Vick was an absolute cheat code.
Okay.
It was the best thing in the world if somehow you injured him and then you had Schaub come in, because the guy's game was, it was a completely different way of style that you had to play offense now. So if you could hurt Vick and get him on a hit stick or something like that, that was the the gift and the curse of Vic. It's like, as long as I can knock him out the game somehow, now the game is over, because he's not going to be able to play with the Falcons otherwise.
That's what I would do. But also, like, on a more serious note, what were your parents thinking about this at the time?
Yeah, so I guess when I first started, because I've been telling my parents when I was in high school, I wanted to play in like tournament, and they said no for the longest time. But suddenly they, relaxed in my senior year. And then I would have to admit that probably in college, they had no idea all of the tournaments that I was really going into. Like, they knew I was, of course, participating and going to tournaments in New York and also in Jersey, but I guess they didn't know how often until actually our documentary came out a few years ago, where they realized in terms of the extent of it. But, I was able to do my work in school at the same time too. So as long as I was able to graduate in like time and still get into law school, things were actually fine. But, I guess my parents, they've always supported me in any endeavor that I chose. I guess I like to think that I am a reflection of them. So if they trust themselves that they raised me right, then I guess they'll trust that I make the right decisions in terms of how I choose to lead my life.
No, I like that. And tell the viewers a little bit about the documentary. How was that experience?
Okay, yeah, exactly. So the documentary actually breaks down a number of the topics that we are talking about right now, the background of myself and background of Ray in terms of how we got into gaming, and also gives a little type of like snippet into the things that we're working on here at Elite Sports Gaming.
I like that. So let's fast forward. Tell the people a little bit more about ESG and what some of the goals are, short term, because I know you guys are in the middle of getting an actual video game off the ground. What's that process like? What made you want to start the game?
Well, in terms of what the inspiration was to actually start the company, it was a myriad of things, to be honest. One thing was I was involved in a mass shooting in a Madden tournament where unfortunately 2 of my friends were killed and 10 of my friends were shot. And in not only being, a part of that, but at the same exact time seeing the aftermath of that and the way it was handled, I'll be honest in saying that the biggest issue that I had coming out of that was survivors like remorse and survivor's guilt. And obviously seeing that there were certain people who it affected obviously more so than myself, because they were, wounded by gunshot or whatever the case may be, or, whatever the reasons were. So because of that, it really hit me very, very hard. But at the same exact time, seeing the way that they were taken care of, or I should say the lack of the way that they were taken care of, was the most frustrating thing for me. So we were involved in a 3-year lawsuit and so on and so forth. And I really just felt like they had they just had a lack of recourse in terms of what could happen for them to their benefit after a horrific incident occurred. So it seemed like people weren't paying attention to them. And again, I say that as it's them, not me, because again, I just was okay to kind of like block things out personally, but it just wasn't okay for my friends. So that was one part of it. And then that kind of made me aware of lack of recourse in general. And what I mean by that is, when you look at, for instance, athletes who obviously get paid millions of dollars, well, when they're in video games, the companies make billions of dollars off of them, but the actual athlete makes about $15,000 to be in the game, which people could say, okay, that's fine, whatever. But again, if we look at the NCAA now with their video game, the athletes will make $600. And again, people say it's nice to just make something, but that company is making $1 billion off of it. So it's, just in terms of lack of recourse, we see this in so many spaces with dancers who have their dances in Fortnite. Oftentimes, Fortnite doesn't have to pay you legally because it's, Supreme Court rule that you cannot copyright a dance move. And as a result of which, as long as you don't name it the gritty or whatever the name of the dance is, you can just rip the dance itself, and that influencer is not going to get paid off of it. So I continually saw where there was lack of recourse for so many people in the gaming space or just in the industries in general that we were closely affiliated with. And I thought that there was an opportunity to change that. And then naturally, in having the gifts that we have of understanding the space so well for literally 20 years as professional gamers, it really just all hit me like at one time where it was just natural. And I just got into this mode. Now at the time, I wanted to make sure it was airtight before I approached Lemont about it and said, okay, like, I think we should do this, because naturally, you know, with him being a corporate attorney and, you know, just in life in general, that you're going to have to make a serious shift in your life. And then of course, be super dedicated to this brand new path that you go down. So, you know, I wanted to make sure I had everything ironed out. And when I did, and I approached him, he was fully in. But the thing was, now it was like, look, he was an attorney. I was a software developer. That was its own journey in and of itself. I was obviously a pro gamer. He was a pro gamer and a YouTuber. That was a journey in and of itself. Now we were starting this brand new one with obviously, you know, founding ESG. And of course, that came with so many things. And some of those things were obviously raising capital and going to VCs or publishers who at the time, quite honestly, laughed us out the room. So they thought it was all impossible to do these type of things. So for us, you know, it was certainly something that formed for reasons that we believed we can do it. B, we saw that there was an opportunity to change our families' lives in doing it. But at the same exact time, also, you know, increasing recourse for people. And then in that process, honestly, it's just been a movie so far. It's been surreal as to what's happened thus far.
No, for sure. I want to ask some more specifics about the game, but I think, you know, if you're someone watching this isn't in video games or whatever, just from a, you know, macro business level, take people through those steps of what it's like to raise capital for a company. Like, what is that process like? I think a lot of people, especially in our community, need to know those steps, you know?
Yeah, so, you know, I'll be real, because, you know, there's a quote that Jeff Bezos said, or I believe it was him or something, or somebody who's also, you know, a billionaire. He said that if you want to raise capital, you have to be prepared to hear 100 no's.
Right.
And if you are Hispanic or if you are black, then you should triple that number. And then it all comes down to, in terms of just, you know, not only being prepared to hear 300 no's, but also in terms of, if you have faith in your skills and also faith in the business and what you are creating, then don't worry about the naysayers, because they're not saying no because they're saying no for a variety of reasons, but the main reason why they're saying no is because they're different types of people. Mm-hmm. So when you're trying to raise capital, a person may say no because they're not an investor, or they may say no because they may be an investor, but they're a different type of investor. There's some people that may be more long-term investors, somebody like a Warren Buffett, or there's some people that may be more short-term, like they like to flip houses, like, I don't know, like a Grant Cardone or somebody like that. Right. So you have to, in terms of find a person that matches your ethos in terms of what you are trying to build and people that you want on your team. And that's where so many of the no's come from. There's not so much like your product is bad. It's just that they may not understand it. They may not understand you. And truly, they may not understand business or investing as well. And then that just comes down to, you know, finding the perfect partner of those that are married or in a, you know, serious relationship. It's not like the first person you met, you know, you guys said yes to them. You know, it's a whole process in terms of finding a person that's the perfect match for you. And it's no different whenever you're raising capital for your business.
Right. And then, you know, with that being said, in terms of going out and literally hearing, you know, we're again, we come from a different mindset, because I think being professional gamers prepped us in so many ways. Like, you know, it's funny because, like, taking a side note for a moment, Lemont is the only other person I know in the world who could do something that I had prided myself on. If you see like someone like Michael Jordan, who would practice free throws like with his eyes closed, right? And he could hit those free throws even like in a game. There were things like that I prided myself on doing in Madden, right? And actually, you know, literally being able to run certain routes and user catch it and so on and so forth without even looking at the TV and turning around. And Lemont was the only other person I know that can do that. And it literally came down to a bet where neither one of us even knew that each other could do it, and obviously just showed the preparation. So because of that, we had an approach that, like, if you do something 1,000 times or 10,000 times or 1,000,000 times, you're just going to get better. It just is that law, right? So for us in business, we came into it with that same approach where if people are going to say no, like, we know people are going to say no. But at the same exact time, we also know that there's a certain amount of no's that we're going to hear before we hear a yes, as he just mentioned before. So whatever the number is whatever the number is. But at the same exact time, because of gaming, we had like a machine-like approach. Doesn't mean that sometimes you're not deterred from continually hearing people say that it's not going to work out. But ultimately, you signed up for it, right? So it is what you have to do. But in us doing that and literally talking to 10,000 people and ultimately being blessed to have 50 core people that invested and you know, truly believe in what it is that we're doing, you have to realize like all the whys of why you do it. And yes, like, you know, for potentially for the money or for the recourse aspect. But what ends up happening is you really do form this type of family. And the biggest thing that came out of Madden for us, in my opinion, was the crew, right? And literally our crew was named the Brotherhood. And in this right here, with all the investors who truly decide to believe in this and then be on board, it really becomes a family where it's 50 people who it's us against the world. And then it's your employees as well. So you have a core group of people that are essentially taking on everything. And in that's, I think, the beauty of the process, because now, yes, it's hard to hear a million no's, but when you hear it with those people and then you go through it and you win with those people, that's what I focus on. And that's what really becomes a blessing in the whole process.
No, I like that. So what are some of the first few steps that it takes to get a video game off the ground? Like, what does that look like? Well,
first and foremost, it's capital, because without the capital, unless you can do everything yourself, which oftentimes is impossible, you know, it's something where it's going to be impossible to do, right? So to get capital, you naturally have to be able to convey your story. And again, it's almost like a layered approach where you keep going back a layer, right? So you say, look, we need to develop a game and get Xbox and PlayStation to accept it. But before that happens, we need to develop the game. Before that happens, we need to get employees. Before the employees come, we obviously need to have capital and resources. Before we can get capital and resources, we need to get people to believe in us. And before we can get people to believe in us, we have to be able to present that. So we need to have a deck or, you know, whatever the case may be. So there's so many things that you recognize, oh man, I need that too. We need this too. And every single time that happens, I think that's where everything matters, because you're either going to respond to that as like, maybe this is too much for us, maybe we shouldn't have done this, or you're going to respond to it and be like, all right, well, it's another thing that we got to go do, but it's going to build, you know, our repertoire, and it's going to give us another skill set. When he was a YouTuber, and then I ultimately became a YouTuber as a result of it as well, we didn't know that, okay, well, to be a good YouTuber, you need to have a good presence and be able to speak well. You need to be able to understand how to edit your content. You need to understand how to do thumbnails and voiceover work and all these type of things that ultimately, if we looked at it then and been like, this is just too much, forget it, or we could have been like, it's really adding to our skill set. So there's honestly, it's an endless amount of things, depending on whatever it is that you want to do, whether you're a chef or a video game studio owner, it doesn't matter. But at the same exact time, it's really just being comfortable day in and day out with being presented with something new and then taking on that task in a way that you could enjoy it. Because if you can't enjoy it, and you know, you're really just not going to get it done. You're going to ultimately just walk away from it.
No, I like that. And it's like it's obviously a robust set of skills that you both have in terms of the partnership. Obviously, you know, you have the legal background and the development background. What are some other, because I think it's important for anyone watching when you're having a partnership in business, like, you need to rely on other people's strengths. How does that look when you guys are working? Like, who does what? Like, how has that partnership been fruitful for what you're building?
Yeah, so that in terms of that, I like to always think that in terms of my weaknesses, Ray's has as strengths, and some of the weaknesses that Ray has, I have as like strengths. So one of the first things that come to mind is I more so do more of the boring things when it comes to the business. You know, some of the things with the finances and the organizations and the operations and the legal stuff. For that, my strengths is not like, oh, this is like my passion. These are things like I love doing, but to me, I don't mind doing them as well. And also, because that I don't mind doing them as well, I can do them in a very efficient fashion as compared to somebody else on the team was going to do that as well too. And then once I'm able to, you know, accomplish all of those tasks, whatever that's needed for each day or for each week, then that's when I'm also able to dive into more of the whole creative aspects of the game and also the business as well too, such as, you know, coming out with plays and like concepts and things in terms of choosing what's the next task for the team to also work on as well.
Yeah, so I think one great thing for us is that like we complement each other extremely well, and as he said, like I think we just kind of make up for those places where each other lacks a little bit more. So I think the key is that when you're starting in a new venture, partnership is so important, because naturally, like couples could argue, roommates could argue, you know, business partners could argue and see differences and stuff like that. But then there's the dynamic of who has more of a voice or less of a voice, and then the team gets even larger. And then obviously when it comes down to equity or compensation and so on and so forth, all these things, to be quite honest, could like seriously deter you from ever even getting started. It can trip you up before you even get going. So I think it's super important to have a teammate or series of teammates, where you're all focused on just getting the job done, less so than saying, okay, what do I get out of it? Because if that's your primary focus, this journey is so incredibly long that you're really never going to even get there if that's really all you're focused on. So you really just have to be, willing to say, like, we believe we can do this. We each pick up each other's slack, and we're just focused on the task at hand more so than anything else.
No, for sure. And obviously you develop, new partnerships along the way, other people that believe in the dream. So going into that a little bit, how is it working with Eric at Remaster and Shakes at the talent firm?
You want to go ahead?
Yeah, sure, exactly. So with that,
I can't stand either one.
Yes, absolutely. It's great. In terms of that, we've been very fortunate for them to come into our fold in terms of we form a partnership with them, I believe, in terms of in the summer of like last year. And from that, we met so many numerous types of people. In terms of some of the information of the partnerships that have formed from that, we can't say publicly at this date, but in terms of a lot of people in the big worlds in like entertainment and also in sports as like well. So a lot of these people are going to be integrated into the game as well. And also in terms of some of the businesses that we also have interacted with through those partnerships with Eric and also with Shakes, of course. We're really excited about how they're going to be totally indoctrinated into the game.
Nice. And I know we're definitely going to have to do a part 2 soon because there's a limited time. But before I let you guys go, I'd love to hear, briefly from both of you, what are some tips you'd like to give some other entrepreneurs and gamers watching this interview today?
Oh, gosh. Well, Ray probably already knows what I'm going to say, even though I'm not even a big fan of this person in real life, but I'm a fan of his work. So I would say the first thing you got to do is read the book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, to figure out if this is really what you want to do and see where you actually fall in his quadrant. And then once you read that, then you will know if you have the fire in you to do this, to join whatever venture you want to actually start or whatever type of, path you want to follow based off of his like quadrant. So, and it's as simple as that. It's not like, oh, there's so many things you have to do. That's the book that will actually tell you to point you in the right direction if you want to enter the space. And you will know if you are that person, you will know if you are not. And if you're not that person, that's also fine as well too, because there's multiple things that you can do to succeed in life besides just, starting your own venture or, becoming a billionaire investor or things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, literally, he had told me for years to read this book. And the thing about it for me is that I think one thing that's super important is just finding the way that you can glitch something. Because for me, I hate to read, to be honest. I'm more of an audio-visual type of person. I'm a podcast person, so I'm an audiobook person. So with all those things, it was like, yeah, I'll get to it, and I never got to it. And then finally, I was like, you know what, let me see if I can find it on YouTube or something like that where I can just listen to it. And at the time, I just listened to it while I was playing FIFA, to just keep it real. And then it got so good to me that I literally put everything down and fully dedicated my time to paying attention to what was being said. And then I joked with him and said, why didn't you tell me to read this earlier? Because obviously it was so impactful, not only for him, but for me as well. But ultimately, I think it's super important for like anyone, whether obviously we come from a situation where we're both people of color, black and brown, and this is not as readily available advice that our people get. But so the truth is, you just got to get started. And in one way of just in terms of getting started, I think the key here is that when you're actually going to look at like, well, I don't know what to do. Like there's a million things I need to do. That could be overwhelming. And for me, one of the biggest things, whether it's Madden, whether it's my partnership with Lemont or whatever the case may be, it all comes down to mentorship, that guidance and that team. So you're going to learn 10 times faster if you have the right mentors or the right business partners. So if you're going to look to get into this space, there are certain people, like for instance, there are consultants that get paid millions of dollars to tell you everything that you need to know. Yeah. But then there are also literally business partners or mentors who will tell you everything that they know for free, right? So when you come across people in life, you'll have to notice all these type of things. And the people that you can learn from that are truly an asset to you, you need to be a sponge. Ask as many questions as possible. And then from what you learn, apply as much as possible so that you could ask even more questions. So it's things like that if you really, truly don't know what to do to get started, it's literally start asking as many people, as many questions as you can, and you'll start to see that ultimately you're learning and picking up so much that, again, you can now start to apply some stuff. Just take it as small as that as it needs to be. You don't need to have it all figured out day in and day out, but ultimately you'll start to see the small victories day in and day out, and that's what really all it's about.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for stopping by. We'll have to do a part 2 soon. Hope to see you on the Breakfast Club and all that.
Yeah, absolutely. That'd be awesome.
But thank you so much. So
thank you.
Peace.